Greetings and welcome back to Old Ways Rising Farm YouTube channel, where today we're going to talk about sharpening an axe properly, specifically a felling axe. Now, I am working on a series of videos on these forestry tools. I already have a video up on saws, on crosscut saws and the different tooth patterns and where they all come into play. I'm planning a video on sharpening saws and then on using saws. Here with axes, again, I'm planning a video on all of the different types of axes with examples of them all. I'm still working on that collection and sharpening and then using them, a technique for using an axe properly. So this is one in an evolving series, and this will be, it's not going to be boom, boom, boom here on the channel. It's going to be as I get the materials to be able to do it. So if you want to help see the video on all the axe types, there is a Patreon link at the bottom of the screen. When I get enough collected, you'll see the video. So if you want to help, you can wander on over to Patreon. There's some great resources there for you as well. But today we're just going to talk about sharpening a felling axe, that one piece of the puzzle, and the rest will be added later. Now, before we dive into sharpening, I do need to say a couple of words about what makes a good felling axe. And usually when people look at a picture of an axe or draw a picture of an axe, they show it this way, right? The axe in profile. But this profile is not what tells you anything about how the axe is going to cut, right? People like to show axes in this profile and then get into arguments over is a Rhineland axe better than a Hudson Bay pattern, better than a New Jersey pattern, ... etc. It's like, truth is, none of that matters. It really doesn't. That's aesthetics and what you like. Are there slight differences, like little niche uses that make one profile this way slightly better for some specific task? Yeah, kinda. There are hewing axes that are a little bit different, and something like a Hudson Bay lets you choke up for close carving, but those niche benefits are very niche. Okay? If you're just going to go and try to chop down a tree and split some firewood, none of it means a hill of beans a difference. Right? It really doesn't. So this is not how I want you to look at the axe. Here, show it that way. This is how I want you to look at the axe. This profile, that's the money shot for an axe and telling you what it will do well. Okay? So before we sharpen this particular axe, I'm not going to go over all of the profiles because, again, some of them are niche, but I do want to talk for just a minute or two about what makes a good felling axe. So if we look at our two profiles of axes that are readily available at the hardware store, yes, I know there's many more edge geometries that you can put on an axe, but these are the ones that are commonly available that you're going to see every day if you go to a big box hardware store. Okay, so that's where I'm going to stop for this particular video. This is a splitting profile. Okay? This is a splitting profile that's designed to exert the maximum outward force on a log when you come down in the end grain. Right? So they're designed to have just a little bit of edge to bite in and start the split. And then the sides are straight and widely flaring. So if you think about this in a split in a log, right, if this little blue line is where the log exists, you want the maximum pressure on that side, the maximum contact to split that open. Okay? So you want this contact and you want a flaring thing because you're trying to exert sideways pressure. These still need modification. They're never quite sharp enough and they tend to bounce, right? You don't want a bouncing splitting maul, right? Still no good, but this is the correct geometry in general terms. Okay? Now this is the correct geometry for a felling axe that you're going to use for chopping trees and bucking logs in half. Okay? Much, much narrower. And they're always a little bit hollowed out, right? This is wide because this is where the eye comes in for the handle. So you have to flare around the eye a little bit. But then you want to get in and get narrow as quickly as possible. Because when you're chopping trees or bucking logs, you don't want side pressure. You need a little bit to blow out chips, but the minimum possible. And even like the minimum possible, the thinnest possible blade that will hold up in a chop is going to be more than enough side pressure to pop the chips out, right? So we're trying to get rid of that side pressure, and that's a very different geometry. We want the axe to come down. You're going to always come into your wood at a 45-degree angle, and you want that to slice cleanly and smoothly as deep as possible with the smallest amount of resistance, which means the smallest amount of friction, which means the least possible side pressure. Very different constraints. And like here on the splitting axe, where you have the all of this contact with the wood, and that's a good thing. Here, we want a convex edge, or what sometimes people call an appleseed edge, this curve in, rather than a true facet. Because if you have a true facet, you're going to have this wide area of contact. But if you look at the appleseed edge, and again this blue line represents where the wood is, on a curved surface, you just have one very small point of contact. So when you make this curve, it gets stuck in your cut much less often. You don't want your axe to get stuck, right? We're not axe throwing and trying to stick it to a target. We're axe chopping. We want it to go in, cut as deep as possible, then come out with the maximum ease. Okay? So we don't want it to get stuck. Thus the appleseed edge. Now, when you're thinking about working on the edge of a tool, there's kind of three stages, right? You have your shaping, your rough shaping, which starts with the initial forging of the tool from a blank and ends with file work. Okay? Then you have your rough sharpening, which is going to be coarse stones, and then polishing, which is going to be your final sharpening with fine stones. Okay? So when we buy an axe from the store, most of the rough sharpening is done. Okay? Or sorry, the rough shaping is done. But it's very common to buy an axe from the store where they continue this line straight down and then it's sharpened on a jig, so you end up with a true facet here. Okay? Well, I'll hold that thought for a second. When you get these, you want to get out a file and you want to take those cheeks out, right? And cut that material out with a file. And that's step one, removing that little triangle of purple. So sometimes when you get one with this profile and you want to change it to that profile, there's a little bit of rough sharpening. You can do that with a file. You can do that with a flap wheel or a grinder. If you do it with a flap wheel or a grinder, make sure you go slow and you don't destroy the temper in the steel. Okay? This one, it's probably not going to pick up too well in camera, but there's a couple little grinder scuffs that you can still see in here. This one, when I got it, did have that profile, and I quick just knocked those facets out with a grinder. Okay? Took 5 minutes. And then smoothed it off with a file. So if you get this profile, then yes, you want to modify that. Now there's a third profile that you will commonly find at the hardware store, and that's an axe which comes out, has a little bit of flare here, and then has a little material right in there. Okay? What these are is a hybrid pattern. After the, 60s and 70s, when pretty much every farm has a chainsaw, people stopped using axes for felling and bucking trees. And when that change happened, the axe market went to occasional use and to campers. So this profile comes in that market where the axe manufacturers try to make an axe which is reasonably choppy for chopping firewood to length and then reasonably splitty to split it. So they're trying to put a little bit more outward force for better splitting, but not enough to but not enough to really be a true splitter like this guy. And at the same time, they're trying to not make so much that it won't chop anymore. So it's an attempt to make a jack of all trades axe. I don't like them. Okay, you can get them if you find one for $2 at a yard sale. Buy it, take your flapper wheel and grind that off, and make it an actual chopping axe. Right, make it an actual felling axe. But if I'm going and I'm looking at a rack of new axes, every time I see that, I'm going to let it sit. If I was going to go canoe camping for 2 weeks, I might pick one up. Right? They do have a use in that particular niche. And that niche is also what, if you look at the Nesmith double bit axe, he had one side with this profile and one side with that profile, so he had a chopper and a splitter, right? And that would actually be even better for like a canoe camping axe than one of these. But the hybrid pattern, it does have its use for an occasional use camping tool, but it's not going to be as good a splitter as this or as good a felling axe as the true felling axe profile. Okay, there's a couple of these that are really collectible. So like the El Lobo, the Council Tool El Lobo axe, where they did a whole lot of ornate stuff with that raised edge, and that one is a true splitting axe. Right, if you get one of those, they're worth quite a lot of money. Don't mess with them. But you know, if you get one of these for $2 and you want to grind that off, and it's just a boring old every axe, go for it, right? You can still make a good felling axe out of it. But to make it a good felling axe, that lug needs to be gone, okay? If you're going canoe camping in Canada or the Boundary Waters or something like that, and you want one of these for, you know, to ride in the bottom of the canoe and weight's not an issue, space isn't an issue, yes, that can have a use. But for a farm, and this is a homesteading channel, I'd rather see you get one of these that's a true chopper and one of these that's a true splitter, and have both of them leaning against your firewood pile. So, that's my comment on rough shaping. And if you buy your axe wisely, you'll never have to really do that, or not do that to any great extreme. Let's go talk about the sharpening stage after the shaping is done. What better place to sharpen an axe than right in the middle of a wood pile, right? You don't need a lot of tools for this. An axe, you're not going to want to create the super fine edge that you would on a wood carving tool, right? When you're sharpening your wood carving tools, you need a large array of grits, and you need to work all the way through the grit cycle every time you make any kind of modification. And you need to make a modification every few times that you strop it so that you don't get your micro bevel too fine. An axe is different. An axe it's still a finesse tool, but it's a much more forceful flavor of finesse, we'll say, right? You still, if you find yourself just absolutely battering your way through the tree, you're not using your axe right, and or it's not sharp enough, okay? So you should be able to deliberately place a strike with moderate force, let the axe do the work, direct it well, and take out a chip, okay? If you're not doing that, either look at your technique or sharpen your tool. You don't batter trees to death. That's not good. Something's wrong if you're battering trees to death. Something's also wrong if you're beaver chewing them, right? But that's another video, another conversation. So we're going to look at our tools. All you need is one coarse stone, okay? And these are fairly common, that you get these kind of round hockey puck looking axe stones. And it's a medium grit silicon carbide. They don't always say exactly what grit it is, but it's a medium grit silicon carbide. It's the same stuff that you would get that you would consider a fine grit on a bench grinder. Right? It's that same sort of material. You'll also find these in a oval shaped stick called a scythe stone. It's the same stuff. You can use either one, it's the same stuff. I do recommend getting something for field sharpening that's easy to fit in your pocket or in a backpack. So get some of these smaller stones. But if you're going to be keeping this only on the farmstead, you can use the same bench stones that you would use for sharpening your woodworking tools. It'll work just fine. But I like to have some more portable sharpening tools. So this is going to do the rough sharpening, okay? And then we're going to go right to polishing with a soft Arkansas stone. For a small portable field stone, I do recommend the Arkansas stone. This is a unique material. It is silica cemented with silica. So Arkansas stone has the majority of the characteristics of a modern ceramic stone, but it's a natural stone. Okay? You can use a diamond hone for this. You can use a modern ceramic stone. But the soft Arkansas just works so well that you really don't need to do anything else. And the soft Arkansas is more than fine grit enough to polish an axe, more than well enough to be a good axe edge. Okay, so these are really the only tools that you need for field sharpening after the coarse work has been finished, the coarse shaping has been finished. Now, I use both of these stones with water. You can use both of these stones with oil, but I like to use water because, again, this is field use, and it's much more convenient to work with these wet than oily. And again, do you really want to put that oily stone back in your pocket? So we need to saturate the stone with water. And this is the downside to your synthetic stones, is that they're very, very porous, and then they absorb a lot of water. So if you could zoom in here, hon. So when we're saturating our stone, you can see the water still absorbing a little bit. We want to keep wetting it. There it is. You see how now it's sitting on top? Mm-hmm. Right? It's not all absorbing in. When that happens, your stone is ready to use. And that's the downside to these synthetic stones, is that they absorb a whole lot of water, whereas these natural stones are splash and go. Just splash a little water on them and you're good to go. Okay? So we make sure that our stone is nice and wet. And then for a major sharpening, we want to work the whole edge. So don't start right at the cutting edge. Start back here, okay? And we're going to work the stone across. From back to front, okay? Until we can see that the scratch pattern is consistent all the way around along this cutting surface. Now I'm not worrying about way back here, because the wood should never really be touching way back here. The reason we want to work this whole surface is because if you only work the edge, okay, think about a nice edge like this. When you work the edge, you develop a little micro bevel. And then every time you work that micro bevel, it becomes more and more obtuse, right? So when you're working a day in the field, every hour or so, you touch up that micro bevel, you just strop it quick, and you can strop it with the stone. We'll talk about that. You don't need a leather strop to strop an edge. But at the end of a long day or couple day work session, you want to work this whole edge so that we take that now slightly too obtuse micro bevel and reshape that overall geometry. Okay? This doesn't take real long. Okay? Doesn't take real long, and we don't want to remove a whole lot of material, right? You would not want to do this with a file. That would take too much, that would eat up too much of your edge, okay? So we're literally just working until we have even scuff marks all the way along, because the micro bevel, the key word is micro. It's a small deviation from the desired geometry, so we only need a small alteration to fix it, okay? But you do want to make sure that every so often you do this. You want to do this anytime you polish out a chip. If you cut dirt and get a chip in it, you polish out that chip. You want to reform this whole edge geometry, you go back to shaping, okay? This axe was absurdly sharp, and it had an absurdly busy week here a week ago or so. So I want to go through the whole process, and also every so often just re-wet it and take the cuttings off of your stone. So I did that side, then I'll go and I'll do the other side the same way. Always do the process on both sides before you move to the next process. Now, some people will say that you have to move your stone in circles. You don't have to move your stone in circles. You can move your stone horizontally. You can move your stone in circles. What matters is that you move your stone with the correct geometry. With relation to the edge angle you're trying to create. And also what matters is making sure that you use the whole stone, the whole surface of the stone. Right, so when I'm back here, I like to move it in circles. When you move it in circles, you're going to naturally, you can see where the smudge is, you're going to naturally overemphasize the middle. And then when I get closer to the edge, I personally am more accurate moving it horizontally. And I'll do that for a little bit. And then I'll give the stone an 1/8 turn. Move that for a little bit, give the stone an 1/8 turn. So on and so forth. So that I make sure that I'm using the whole surface. Okay? So you can see where my scuff marks are, right? There's a scuff mark here, scuff mark here, scuff mark here, scuff mark here. Then I turn, scuff mark there, and then I turn, scuff mark there. And now this has no scuff marks, so I'll finish off in that region of the stone. And finish that process. I'll clean my stone. So when you see me switching back and forth between circles and horizontal movement, that's about managing my stone, not so much about what I'm doing to the axe. Right? Because your stone is a tool too, and as an important tool in your ability to keep your axe in good condition, it needs the same respect that this does. Right? So that's how you prevent grinding weird contours into it. So now I'm looking at this, and I'm looking at the sunlight glinting off of it, and I'm tilting it a little bit, and I can see even marks on that whole surface, and I can see even marks on this whole surface, except for right here, I missed a spot. So as with anything, when you see a problem, you fix a problem. Don't just go on and assume that that problem's going to go away, because in the next step, you're going to just have to go back and fight with it anyway. Okay? Now, we've polished that whole surface. Well, not polished, but we've scratched that whole surface with the stone, and we've gone to the edge, but we haven't worked on the edge. Right? So again, if you think about that micro bevel growing too much, we just took this in straighten that back out. And now we'll reestablish, now it's really, really straight. Now we'll reestablish a very small micro bevel in the actual sharpening process. So this is where we start to touch the edge. Up to this point, nothing has actually gotten sharper. Now we're about to make it sharper. Okay? So for this, we're going to come and find that angle right before the edge, and then just tilt the stone up, maybe another 5 degrees, if that, okay? So you go right to the edge, but not touching it, and then just tilt up just enough to touch it. It probably won't even pick up in the camera here. And now we're gonna work directly on that edge. And this goes very, very quick. Now, how do you know if you've done it right? You won't be able to see it with your eyes, but you can see it with your fingertips. Okay? So as we work right on that edge and we polish the little micro scratches and micro chips and all of the blemishes that we put in that edge in the process of chopping, when I run my finger from the back to the edge, right, this way, I'm not going that way. Obviously, I want to keep my finger, right, from the heel toward the edge, right, running my finger over in that direction, okay? It feels very, very smooth. Do this and see what it feels like. And then come from the back and run it like that, and you'll feel a burr, okay? Because as we're polishing this face, that fine edge rolls over a little bit and makes a wire edge on the reverse side. So when I come to the top of it here, I don't feel a burr there. When I come to the middle, I feel a burr starting to develop. When I come to the end, I don't feel a burr. So right here, where my two fingers are, I successfully sharpened that edge and created the burr. But here and there, I'm not done yet. So what we want to do is just keep working along this edge. Okay? And then keep checking. Feel from the back, there's my burr, okay? So I have burr all the way across there, all the way across there. Right here is where I lose the burr. I need to do a little bit just on that tip. So we're just on that tip a smidgen. And I want to keep this curve. It's real easy to lose this curve by over sharpening the middle. That curve helps it bite in. So we do want to do this even all the way there. Nice burr, nice burr, nice burr, nice burr. Okay, there I lose it. So I'm just going to carefully work here. Turn the stone. Okay. Again, always when you're working on the edge of an axe, go from the heel toward the bit, because we don't want to lose our hands in the process of this. That makes it hard to chop. And then run my finger against the back, again in that same safe direction, and I have an even burr. Okay. Once you form that burr, this face is as sharp as I can make it with this stone. So now we're going to work the other face the same way. We're going to flip it over. But I don't want to just keep rolling that burr back and forth. This is where stropping comes in. So before I work this face, I'm going to take my stone and I'm going to find that same angle that I'm going to sharpen at, and I'm going to pull it backwards. And what I'm doing now is very carefully using the grit to grind off that burr, so I'm not fighting with it in the next stage. This is stropping. Removing the burr is stropping. You'll see a lot of woodworkers talk about and use leather strops, and that's good. You can strop with a leather strop. It's removing the burr. But you don't need a leather strop to strop. You can strop with the same stone. The stone that's capable of making that burr is more than capable of removing it. Okay? So we can just do this, and this is very, very light. I'm not putting any pressure. It's just the weight of the stone against the edge, and I'm pulling it backwards. Okay? So very, very light. No pressure. Just allow the stone to glide against that edge and pull that burr backwards. If you don't do that, here's what happens. The burr goes this way, and then the burr goes that way, and then the burr goes this way, and then the burr goes that way, and then it snaps off. When it snaps off, it's going to snap off with a 90-degree bluntness. You might not be able to see it, but it's not sharp. So if you just wiggle back and forth and break off that burr, you're never going to get the maximum sharpness out of your edge. Okay? So you create the burr. Creating the burr monitors your progress and allows you to know if you're done or not, or if you need to keep working somewhere, if you missed a spot. But as soon as you get that feedback, take the burr off, just as I showed you, light pressure, let the grit of the stone grind off the burr. Don't snap it off, okay? This is the old way, like the razor strop way, where, you know, like the old movie where the farmhand takes off his belt and just works his knife back and forth. That's work hardening and breaking off the edge. Don't do that, okay? Take the extra minute and do it with the grit of the stone. So I'm going to wash this stone, get it nice and clean. And now we're going to go and do the same thing on the opposite edge. We're going to get that burr going back where it came from, pointing in the opposite direction. Again, we want to keep our edge centered. If you only ever work it from one direction, yes, you can sharpen it, but you're going to evolve away from the apple seed edge that we want towards a chisel edge. And in a hewing axe, you want a chisel edge, but we're not working with a hewing axe right now. Okay. Burr, burr, burr. Burr's present. We got our burr all the way along. Okay? And every step is going to get faster. Right? Doing this edge just took a lot less time than doing the first edge because I took the nicks out doing the first edge. Right? So this edge didn't have as far to go. Didn't have as much work to do. Flip it over. Make sure, yep, double check myself. Yep, I feel the burr, feel the burr, feel the burr. Now we're going to strop it off. Very gently, very carefully. And please, for the love of all that is good in the universe, don't ever try to do this on a power grinder. You will never, ever, ever get the edge that you want that way. And 9 times out of 10, you're going to overheat that edge, and it's just going to blunt the first time you chop into a tree. Even if you don't see the temper colors, they're there at a microscopic level right in the edge. Don't do this on a bench grinder. You can take that shoulder out on a bench grinder, but don't do this on a bench grinder. Okay, burr's gone. So now with the burr created and then removed on both sides with this stone, we've gotten the maximum sharpness that we can out of this stone. So if we want it sharper, we go to a finer stone. And that's where we go to our Arkansas. and got to clean it. I didn't clean this last time I used it. Just did a couple of quick licks just to hone an edge. I stuck it back in this little case and moved on. Shame on me. You always have to clean these, or they will clog up and they will get real nasty. Now we take this and we do exactly the same thing. We're going to start on the flats and repolish the flats. Now you say, Adam, you're doing all this extra work. Why are you taking all of this time to polish something which isn't actually the cutting edge? The answer is friction. Because this whole convex surface is going to come in contact with the wood. And everything that's going to come in contact with the wood, you want to glance off and glide smoothly. If you have a rough surface, then everywhere it comes in contact with the wood, it's going to try and sand off some of the wood. And that means you're using your energy and your exertion to sand wood that you never have any intention of sanding. And that is not efficient. It does make a difference. And I mean, you can see this tiny little stone is doing a whole lot of work for me. You don't need a big stone. And since these Arkansas stones don't really wear the same way most other stones will, like a piece of slate this size would wear through and break very, very quickly. But a piece of Arkansas stone this size is going to stay the same shape and general dimensions for a very long time. Okay. There we go. We have a consistent grit pattern. I can see the glint. And it feels smooth. Right, this isn't so much about aesthetics as it is smoothness. Okay? And your fingertips are your friends for this. But again, go in safely, just like I am, from the heel toward the edge and then off. Don't come back. Okay? So we're going to call that good for this little episode. I will probably, on my own time, when you're not watching, come back with one step finer stone and really put a polish on that. But for this video, I'm just going to switch to the other side, because you don't want to watch me sit here and sand on steel for an hour. We're going to do the same thing. And every time you switch stones, you want to make sure that you do all of this. Go through the whole process. Don't take shortcuts. Okay. Again, you don't want to watch me do this for hours on end, so I'm going to call that good enough for now. I will, on my own time, probably spend another 20 minutes polishing these two facets. Okay, but for this video, we're going to move on. And just like when we used the coarse stone, I haven't touched the edge yet. When I'm polishing the flats, I haven't touched the edge. But now I'm going to touch the edge. Come find that last final bevel, and then just pick it up another degree or two. And then just go along that edge. Okay. Check for your burr. Now, every time you go to a finer stone, two things are going to happen. One is that burr is going to come faster because you've done more of the work and you have less material to remove. See, I'm already there everywhere except right on this corner. But at the same time, that burr is going to be smaller and finer. Okay? So the burr I'm creating with this stone, and I'm feeling right now, is only half as meaty as the burr that I created with this stone. That's okay. You're not looking for the burr to be a certain dimension. You're looking for the burr to be consistent all the way around the edge. Whatever dimension it is fine. That's going to vary with the nature of the steel and the nature of the stone. But you're not trying to create a particular burr. You're trying to create a consistent burr. So now we flip it. We strop it. Just like before. Okay. And burr's gone. So now I work on this edge. Now you notice I'm stropping at every step. Every time I flip the tool, I'm stropping. A lot of people teach sharpening, and they'll just go from grit to grit to grit and then strop it once all the way at the end. That will work, okay? If it didn't work, nobody would do it, right? If it didn't work at all, nobody would do it. But I don't think it's the best way to work, because you are going to get some work hardening and you are going to get some breakage of the burr in the process. I don't want any work hardening. I don't want any breakage of the burr. And that will make my edge just a little bit more durable. So in my opinion, you see, I'm doing this in real time for you. This isn't sped up. This isn't edited. Cut out a couple boring spots here and there in these videos, but I'm not over editing things. Not hiding anything, right? So it doesn't take that much extra time just to go and do it and get rid of that wire edge. And it will be a more durable edge, and you will be happier with your tool. Okay? But at the same time, I'm not trying to throw shade at the people who do it the other way. It works for them. Go for it. But this is how I like to do it, because I want the maximum amount of time cutting with my tools and the minimum amount of time sharpening with my tools. So I would personally rather spend that extra 2 or 3 minutes in my half-hour edge rebuilding session, because every time I have to put my work down, clear a space at my bench, find my sharpening tools, sharpen, touch up the edge, it's a lot more than just the 2 or 3 minutes of doing it right in the first place. It's especially true if you're out in the woods and you've got to pull all your sharpening tools out of your backpack. Okay. Feel for the burr. Feel for the burr. A little weak right here at the tip. It's developing, but it's a little weak. So right there. There we go. Okay. So now we have polished that edge. Take off the burr. Again, very, very gentle, very, very careful. Right, if you take this stone and you come up with that angle and pull it across, you're just going to roll your whole edge over, and now you're all the way back to ground zero with this. So the stropping stage, you want to be very, very gentle, very, very careful. Just the weight of the stone, even though there's not much weight here. So that if I do something clumsy, it's not going to have enough force to make a major alteration to the metal in the axe bit. Very careful, very gentle. Like I said earlier, for an axe, I am going to stop with the soft Arkansas stone. Spend a little bit more time with it here on these faces to polish them up just a little bit more. But you don't need to go to the hard Arkansas stone or surgical black or anything like that. It's just not necessary for an axe. Because of the force involved when you bring this down into a tree, if you get that too acute or too sharp, it can become self-defeating. Right? For a carving tool, yes, if this was my good carving knife, my good whittling knife, and I was doing this, this is pretty much the coarse stone. And then I would work through 2 or 3 grits of Arkansas stone. Okay? And it would be a mere see yourself in it polish. We don't need a mere see yourself in it polish for an axe. It's just, there's no point in it. Right? If it was worth doing, I'd do it. Now, a racing axe, like the lumberjack they use in lumberjack competitions, those are sharpened all the way up to something like a black Arkansas. Okay, you can shave with those, but those are very special conditions where they're only using the softest wood, you know, pine and aspen and stuff like that, and they're picking pieces of wood that don't have any knots in them specifically. Okay, so because it's such a niche use, and things are designed in such a way that you're not going to be exerting the same force on the tool as you will when you go out into the field. You can put a much sharper edge on it. But when you go out into the field and you're just chopping a tree because it fell across your fence row, you got to chop it where you got to chop it. If there's a knot, you go through the knot, right? If it's hardwood, you chop the hardwood. If it's softwood, you chop the softwood. So you need a much more general purpose tool for that application, and for that general purpose edge, just stop with the soft Arkansas. You don't need anymore. And that's a go. That's our finished edge, right? This will cut very, very well. And if you take an axe and you do this, take the time to do it right. Chop a couple chops before you do it, chop a couple chops after you do it, and your face will light up in a real big smile. So I want you to experience that smile. I'm going to put the types of saw videos here in the end screen. And as I build more videos in this series, I will build that end screen to lead from one to the next so they're easier to find. I'm working on it. I've just got to find the time and the funds to get all of the collections together and to do all of those processes on camera. It's coming. I'm very grateful for your patience and just grateful that you're here with us today at Old Ways Rising Farm.